Intro to Python tutorial series, where I'll be covering all of the basics and fundamentals you need to know before you can use Python to build your own project or to automate some of your daily tasks. Right. So as you know, this channel has been revolved around web development using Python, but I've never have a formal tutorial on introduction to Python, so I decided. But this is week 0, right? Week 0. Sorry, started at 1, but it's actually week 0. Conditional statements or if statements. Week 2 we'll do iterations or loop. Week 3 we'll do list and dictionary. Week 4 we'll do functions. Week 5 we'll do object-oriented programming 1. Week 6 we'll do object-oriented programming 2. Week 7 we'll do do intro to graphic user interface using Turtle, and week 8 we'll conclude the tutorial tutorial session. Okay, so let's go ahead and just get started. But before I actually get started, let's start with a question. So feel free to pause the video and think about what is programming. Well, programming is a process of accomplishing a specific computing result or to perform a particular computing task, usually by designing or building an executable computer program. That's a very fancy way to just say it's a way to make computer do stuff for you. All right, it's a way of making computer do stuff for you. But how are you have some familiarity with Python, right? Python's a programming language that basically allow us the programmer to interact with the software, with the computer. There are millions of other, or not millions, thousands of programming language. Well, maybe million actually, but there are probably thousands of other programming language out there. Other common ones are includes Java, C++, but Python's been the most popular one, so that's why we'll be using it. And it's also one of the most powerful programming language. It can do a lot of stuff. But the first thing is we need to set up a programming environment. So writing code is not just like writing a Word document or creating a Google Doc. We need to have specific software installed in order to write code. Sort of like take money to make money, but it takes code to write new code. But instead of setting everything up locally, we'll use a online Python compiler, right? It just basically translates our code into machine readable code. So feel free to go to this website called replit.com. If you have a similar one, feel free to use that as well. Create a new account. If it asks you any questions, make sure you pick Python as one of your 3 favorite programming languages, right? If asked. And then finally create a new Python repo. Feel free to pause the video, but this is what you should see. Right? This is what you should see. But yeah, feel free to pause the video if you need more time. All right. So let's go write our first Python program. It's called Hello World because all it does is just print the message Hello World to the screen. Legend said this is the first message that is printed ever using the first programming language. Don't know if that's true, and I just made that up. So take it with a grain of salt. But let's go ahead and just write this into our REPL and see what we'll get. By the way, if you're using Replit, for first time, they often have this AI enabled. Make sure we disable that just for the sake of this tutorial. Otherwise, you might not actually learn anything because you might end up seeing AI is kind of smart and it knows what we're trying to do. I know, scary place. Thank you, ChatGPT. Okay, so go ahead, just write that, and then we can press run, right? The run button's up here. We will get into nitty-gritty detail on week 8 on like what does run button actually do? What's behind run button? But in this question mark wrapped around the string, right? Double quotes. You could use single quote if you like, but if you use single quote, make sure you wrap it around 2 single quotes. Do. And then we have print, right? Print for now, you can just think of it as you can see here, function. But we are not going to do function, right, until a little bit later. But for now, you can just think of function as it just does something for you, right? And in this case, print function, all it does is just print something to a screen, right? Print whatever you put in the parenthesis to a screen. Except it doesn't print literally everything in the parenthesis. If you put quotation marks around it, around the text, it will just print the text itself, right? So make sure you don't forget to put quotation mark around the text. Oops, this is amazing. And this is why I like Google Slides so much. Just crashed midway. Okay, I hope it doesn't happen in the rest of the video. If it does, we will deal with it. Okay, so in the next thing, let's talk about string concatenation, right? So string concatenation, all it does is just merge two string together, right? Very literally, just merge two string together like this, right? So let's just create another print statement. So you press enter, right? That creates a new line for us. And then all we need to write is this. Right? Notice how we have a addition sign, right? All it does, I tell Python, okay, let's merge these two strings together. And as you can see, it works, right? It works. A couple things to note on console, right? This is called console. Ignore the packager outputs. We don't really care about that. For now, we're just going to focus on RAM. Right. And notice how there's, interestingly, it actually tells how long did it take to execute the code. It's actually a little bit longer than what you would do if you actually install Python in your local device and then did it that way, because there's latency, because Replit also has server, our client connect to our server, blah blah blah, whatever. So latency. But generally speaking, it would take longer if you have more code, right? Which makes sense. All right, let's go back. So another way to concatenate is through comma. This only works in print statements, though. All right, this only works in print statements, and all we need to do is we'll do the exact same thing and replace it. Replace plus with a comma, but there's a difference I want you all to see if you can notice. Right? Let's take a look at output. Notice how we got an extra space here. So it turns out when you're using comma concatenation inside the print statement, it will automatically add a space between the two string, right? Because it makes sense, right? It's for English speaker at least, we're Latin language based speaker. We use space to separate word, right? To separate different word, and this is basically it's basically just tell Python that we're just going to add a space automatically, right? Like so. So we don't need to worry about space. So these are the three concatenations, right, that we can do when we're trying to concatenate, add two strings together. Now you might be asking, why do I do that? Why can't I just do line 1? Well, turns out sometimes you might not know what string, the value of string B is, right? The value of second string. And you might want to do it just dynamically so that you don't have to hardcode everything. Right? Hardcode means you're literally just writing down the value. Now that may still sound confusing, it will make a little bit more sense when we talk about variable. And actually right now, input. So input does the opposite as print, right? And all input does is it just take a user's input and allow you to use it throughout your program. So we can do that by just say input and then provide a prompt. Right? Notice how I've been using double quote. Make sure you always have double quotes in it. Input is also a function, but this function, what it does, it just gives us whatever the user typed to us, right? And that's basically what it does. So let's go ahead and press run. Again, for now, you can just think of function as it just does something for you. Notice how we still have the green dot here and the timers keep going. So that's basically telling us we are not done executing yet. Once you click on the console, you can type your name. I can go ahead and type my name. And then notice how then the program is finished, right? So this allows our program to take an input. But as you can see, it's kind of boring because we can't really use a value anyway. So let's go ahead and see how we can use a value. So we can use a value using something called variable. Variable is a placeholder for values, and it's just like math, right? What we did in math, like linear equations, y equals 3x plus 5, x is a variable, right? Y is also a variable. So in here, I just created 3 simple variables for us. Variable x, right? Variable x equals 5, variable y equals 3, variable hello equals string world. So let's go ahead and just create a variable for our input statements, right? So in here, I can just say name equals, right? Name is a variable, and then input is a value. So, sorry, I don't know what's going on here. Okay, so For now, we just press run to make sure we don't see any errors. Perfect. Actually, I don't really know yet, but spoiler, there shouldn't be any error. Oh, this packaging is taking a while to load. Some of the upload take a while to run. Notice how there's a prompt, right? So similar to print, just prompt what you would put in the parenthesis as a prompt so the user know what to type. Okay, so as you can see, no error has been thrown out. We'll actually be interacting with a couple errors in just a bit. But this is how we can store a variable. But you might still be confused what's variable, but let's just look at this for a minute. So this is in another programming language called Java, right, which I briefly mentioned, and this is in Python. This is how we create a variable in Python. See if you can notice a few difference, right? So one of the difference is semicolon, right? Python doesn't use semicolon. Java uses semicolon. That's like a syntactical, like grammar thing. Another thing you might notice, green squiggly line. Don't worry about that, right? That's just a replit highlighting to indicating you that you haven't used a variable yet, right? When we create a variable, we'll want to use it. Otherwise, we're just, misusing storage and memory space. Now, what's most interesting is this, string, right? Notice how we're explicitly mentioning the type of variable, right? In our variable declaration, rather than in Python. So this gets into a more interesting feature in Python. It's a dynamic programming language, which means for any variable you created, it can store whatever types of value it wants. It can store integers, it can store decimal point numbers, it can store strings, it can store whatever it wants. Rather than Java or most other programming languages, which restrict variable to store only this specific type of variable, and you have to mention it at the start, right? So let's talk about types and what is types. So types is basically just indicating the value of variable, right? Value of types of value, really. Like what types is it? What category is it, right? Of a particular value or variable. You know it because there's some different operation. There's a couple things we'll see in a bit that involves with types. So there are three commonly used types in Python. I will introduce you all to another one next video. But the three common ones are int, float, and str. Int stands for integer, non-decimal point numbers, just whole number. Float is decimal point number, right? Any number has decimal point in it. That is a float. Str stores text character symbols you start to wrap around with quotation marks, right? We've seen that 10 minutes ago. Hopefully you remember that. So, quick pop quiz. What's the data type for 5.0? So hopefully you said float, right? It's not int, even though 5.0 is 5, right? Because that's how we interpret it. To Python, it's a floating point number. It's float, right? Okay, another pop quiz. What's the data type for -3? It's integer, right? It's non-decimal point number. So strictly speaking, it's not really whole number. Whole number, it's a positive number, positive non-decimal point. But it's just, whole number. There's nothing, no decimal point, no nothing. Okay, so we see how we can define a variable, right? So variable, again, just store a value, right? You can imagine a variable as a box, right? If we go back, you can imagine variable name is just a box, right? There's a box, and to reference a box, it's called name. And inside the box, you just put the string hello world inside the box, right? Just put hello world string inside the box. So I want you to create two variables, right? Two variables. One's called age, store your age in it. One's called name, and so I want you to store in name in it. And I want you to print out the name in this order. Hello, my name is name, and I am 8 years old. Of course, I want you to use string concatenation, right? If you forgot, feel free to go back and rewind a little bit. But I want you to use variables and using string concatenations to print them out. Using variables and string concatenation. So feel free to pause and resume the video once you got a chance. Alright, so let's just go ahead and implement together. We'll just leave line 5 as it is. We'll come back to it. Or actually, we may not come back to it. And it's a homework assignment. We'll get to that in a bit. You can redefine variable like that, right? In Python, it's pretty simple, right? You can actually redefine a variable, just saying variable name equals another thing again. So in here, I'm just gonna say name is this and age. I'll put my age and print, right? All I'll be putting is hello. By the way, empty line doesn't matter. It's just for syntactical things in Python. Hello, my name is, and then I will use addition, right? I'll use addition concatenation. Name. So I mean, I gotta add all the spaces. I am age. Okay, as you can see, it's already foreshadowing us that we're gonna get an error, right? We're gonna get to that in a bit. There's a couple things I do want to tell you all. Is notice how I'm using single quotes within a string. When you're doing that, make sure you're wrapping around with double quotes, right? This is why I like to wrap it around with double quotes. If you use single quotes, right, then that means you have to escape it. I'm not really gonna touch that and go that into detail, but just make sure if you're using different type of quotation mark within the string, when you're wrapping it, make sure it's the other type of quotation mark, right? So if you're using double quote, make sure you use single quote. If you use single quote for as a character, make sure you use double quote outside to wrap the string. Okay, so as you can see, we'll be getting an error, and this is the first type of error that we'll see. Just press run. Test name. I can. By the way, once you type the name, just press enter. I forgot if I mentioned that or not. Of course, you don't have to write an answer. But notice how this is the error that we see, right? This is the error. So let's look at the error together, right? It's slightly different than what I had there, but it's basically the same, right? The content's the same. So, it's actually a round-on sentence, by the way. That should be a period. Whoops. If any English teachers watching, I'm sorry. But let's go ahead and take a look, see if we can answer all the 5 questions. So line 1, where is the error, right? Well, error is, it sort of tells you here, right? It's at a file called main.py, and it's line 4. What is the error? Well, let's look at the error message, right? That's the error message. Type error, can only concatenate stir, not int to stir. What does the error mean? Well, let's take a look. Concatenate, we know just adding 2 things together, right? So we said you can only add stir, string to string. You cannot add int to string, right? If we think about it, age is an int, right? Age is int, right? Age is a non-decimal point, which means it's an integer, it's an int. I'm trying to add it to stir. I cannot do that. That's what Python's telling me, right? And step 4 will cause the error. Well, this part caused the error, right? I'm trying to concatenate an int variable to a string value. I cannot do that. So what are the potential solutions? Well, I hope one of you, if you're watching, can think about it like this. If I just add quotation mark around 18, now that will fix everything, right? As you can see, there's no red squiggly anymore, which foreshadows it works. And indeed, it works. But this is not really good because age is a numeric data type. And if I want to do different operation on age, right? Let's say I want to add 5, right? It's an integer. Maybe I want to say, how old are you 5 years later, right? I cannot add a number to a string, right? That does not make sense, and there was certain error. So I want to keep numeric data type numeric, right? Unless it's something like social security number, which then doesn't really make sense to be numeric because it's just a string, right? It doesn't make sense to add 5 to your social security number. So what are something else that we can do? Well, it turns out we can use something called type conversion, and all it does is just converting from one type to another type, right? So we can use stir to convert something to stir. We can use int to convert something to int. We can use float parentheses to convert something to float, right? You're just going to put what you want to convert, the value that you're trying to convert from inside the parenthesis, and to it's just outside specified here, right? So take a moment and think about what will happen if I run the following line. Now I'm not going to actually run it, and this is the error that we'll see, right? So I'm not going to go through all the 5 steps again, right? So these are 5 steps that you should really think about when you encounter an error. is where is it, what does it actually mean, what caused it, and what is some potential solution, right? What is a potential solution? Where are some potential solutions? So notice that in this case, I'm trying to convert a string called high into integer. It doesn't make sense. I cannot do that, right? Because I don't know what that means. Base 10 just means a decimal system, right? Can't do that. So basically telling me it's invalid. Notice how this time it's called value error. It's kind of interesting. There's like 20 different errors, 20 something different errors. We're not gonna get to that in intro to Python, but maybe in intermediate or advanced Python course tutorial, if I ever make one, we'll be getting in depth of what are these errors. Okay, so let's go just fix a program, right? So feel free to pause it and see if you can fix it. So all I need to do is just add stir parenthesis around age, right? And I don't know why I say years old. Okay, perfect. So as you can see, it looks good, right? Now the program works. And the best thing about it is age is still an integer, right? But it works because I converted this value temporarily to string. So I'm adding this to string, right? I'm adding string to string. So turns out I can check the type of a variable or anything, right? Or any value in Python. Just use a type function, right? Again, type function in this case, all it does is just print out the type for us. So to verify that age is still an integer, I can say print type of age, right? And let's take a look. Probably should get rid of the input because it's going to ask me every time. Notice I print out class int. For now, I'm going to ignore the class part, and we're just going to focus on the int part, right? It's still int, so it works. Class, we can get to that. It's part of the object-oriented programming portion, and we're going to spend 2 videos on it because it's very important and it's kind of hard to understand. Okay, so another important thing that programming language can really do faster than us and human, right, is math, right? It's math, especially these operations. So there are 5 common operations in any programming language. There are plus, right? Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and the other one's called modulo. Right? I think first 4 everyone's probably familiar with them. The only tricky thing I would say is for division, it will always give you a float, right? It will always give you a float even though we are dividing 2 integers. Modulo, what it does is it gives you the remainder after you divide the 2 number, right? So 5 mod 3, it's not going to give you 1.66666, right? If I did my math correctly, something. It's going to give you 2 because 2 is a remainder, right? Because let's say you have 5 apples, try to split into 3 boxes evenly, right? You'll see, okay, each box will be able to get 1 apple, and I have 2 apples left. I cannot split anymore. 2 is a remainder, right? Remember grade school? So 2 as a remainder. That's what mod does, right? And it's symbolized using percent sign. Yeah, these are different operators. So feel free to pause the video if you like and do some practice. These are pretty simple, I would say, and they're not really that important, but this is just to get you to know how Python works. And I want you to try to see if you can print out the result for maybe at least 2 of the expressions, right? Print out the result. So for fun, let's just print out this one, 3, because it's a little bit complicated, it seems like. So I need to just do print parenthesis, and this time rather than writing quotation mark, I'm not going to add quotation marks, right? Because it's not string anymore. Because variables, notice I didn't add quotation mark around variable either, because they're actually referring to a value, right? It's referring to a value. It means something to Python. So we're not going to add quotation mark around it. We are referring to variable whenever you're using functions or these sort of expressions where you want Python to actually evaluate it, then don't use quotation mark. Right, oh, I said the third one. 9 minus negative 5. And let's press run. Perfect, got 14, right? 9, you're minusing a negative number, which means you're adding it. So 9 plus 5 is 14. Perfect. Okay, so now let's talk about mass method. these are different type of math methods that we would typically see. Um, you do have to import something called mass. So we're gonna get to that if we have time in video. In the last video, briefly mentioning third-party libraries. So this is really second party because Python developer wrote it. But so apps is a default function, built-in function, which means you can just use it without using the dot notation. Sorry for including a dot there. There shouldn't be a dot there. So apps just tell you the absolute value, right? If you forgot what's absolute value, it just gave you the positive version of the number, right? So in this case, this will print out 5, right? And then we have POW. POW is just exponent, right? It's base raised to the power of exponent. So 4 raised to the power of 1/2. So recall, right? 1/2, it's really the same thing as 4 raised to the power of 1 and then square root and root 2, right? Root 2. So it's this number raised to the power of the numerator to the root of the denominator. In this case, basically telling you what's the square root of 4? Well, it's 2, right? So it turns out there's a quick notation for square root because that is very common, right? Square root dot sqrt, right? Mass dot sqrt. Okay, so what do you think this will print? So take a few seconds, take a look, see if you can interpret what do you think this will print. So this will actually give us an error. It's going to give us a domain error because out of domain, right? You can only take square root of positive number because we like to stay real, right? We like to be real, right? Stay in the real number range. All right. So this is a use of a little bit more absurd example. And honestly, you should really just type in a Python compiler. But for fun, we can try to do this, right? So just similar to evaluating mass expression, right? We look at the innermost parenthesis, right? So this is the most inner expression. So we'll look at that. Mass the power of 4 comma negative 1/2, right? So that's basically telling us 4 raised to the negative 1/2 power, which is basically square root of 1/4, right? Which give us 1/2. So 1/2 raised to the negative 1/2 power. So that's basically square root of 2, I think. Square root of 2. And then you're taking absolute value. Oh, sorry, you're timing it. Yeah, sorry. I thought you were doing math.pow again. So let's restart. So it's 1/2 here, right? 1/2 times negative 1/2. That's negative 1/4. Absolute value. Square root of positive 1/4 is positive 1/2, right? Math.pow of positive 1/2 is basically square root again, right? So it's going to give you 1.414. Okay, so that's really fun. If you want, you can feel free to just type these into Replit, to your REPL, or into your Python compiler or whatever it's using. Perfect. So it looks like this is about the end, and this is a practice that we'll do for each video, and then in the next video we'll go over the practice from the last video. So I want you to create a program that takes an integer input from a user, and that integer input is going to tell the program how many days that they have lived. I want you to calculate the age of the user and print it out, right? So for example, if the user types 365, you should say, oh, you are 1 year old. Something like that. I'll assume the user start at age 0. Yeah, we'll assume the user start at age 0. If you want to dig around, you could probably figure out how to round it to the nearest age. If you can't, just leave it as it is, right? It's gonna be have probably 15 decimal point, but that's fine. So that is the practice, and then we'll go over that in the next video. Perfect. So thank you for watching this week 0 tutorial on Introduction to Python. If you have any question or comment, feel free to comment down below. Link to a slide and the code will be linked in the description down below as well. But yeah, thank you all for watching the video. Stay safe and have a great rest of your day. That was me. Out.